WLMW 90.7 FM.
It's uplifting and powerful, and it's a good message all around.
New Hampshire Family Radio.
It's just a good station to listen to.
How you doing? Good. See you. See you. Government, I need to see you. Thank you for your support. All right. That's what
Our moderator for tonight's debate is a very well-known local personality. Chris serves as the president and CEO of the Greater Nashua Chamber of Commerce. Has been in the position since 2006, I believe, Chris. Chris oversees the strategic vision and the tactical operations for the Chamber's over 600 business members and serves as their spokesman for both state and local business. He's a native Texan, which it's not far way up here from Texas, Chris, but he's lived in New Hampshire for over 10 years, and he's been heavily involved in both the political and business communities. He's a founding director of the Manchester Young Professionals Network and served, I believe, as its first chairman. Before he started the Nashua Young Professionals, and I'm probably going to butcher this name, but Ayugo? Close enough? Okay, Ayugo in 2007. He sits on a number of community and state boards, and he was named one of New Hampshire's 40 under 40 by the New Hampshire Union Leader in 2005. There are many other things that I could say about Chris and what he has done for the state and this community, but that's not what we're here for. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce tonight's moderator, Mr. Christopher Williams.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're as excited about this as I am. One thing that Paul did not mention is that I am a huge political junkie. And this is my favorite part of every 2 years here in New Hampshire. In fact, when I was only 5 years old, my parents, I'm pretty sure, thought I was the strangest kid they'd ever seen because I was literally sitting there watching Ronald Reagan run for president on television, not understanding any of it, but knowing that there was something there that I really, really liked. And ever since childhood, I have always held on to that political fascination, and now I get to engage in it in my professional career, and it's a dream job for me. Not because I only get to dabble in it representing business interests, but because I also get to do stuff like this tonight. Moderate a debate between two candidates for governor here in New Hampshire, one of whom is guaranteed to be our next governor. And that is an honor for me to share this stage with both of you here this evening. And I am delighted to be able to do that. And I want to thank Sister Paula and Paul and the President's Circle for having the confidence in me to be able to do this right, because this is important. It represents the university well. It represents the Nashua community well, which is very important to a few of us, including our mayor sitting here tonight. But it also allows us to really talk about some issues that are important, not just to Nashua residents, but to the entire state of New Hampshire. Tonight's format is a little different than what you might typically see if you watch the WMUR debates or if you listen to any of the debates on NPR or NHPR. Tonight's format is loosely modeled after the historical Lincoln-Douglas debates of the late 1850s. They're not going to be entirely modeled after them, because if you know anything about those debates, you know they went on for hours. And I promise we are not going to do that. We're not going to do that mostly because we want to make sure that you have time to go downtown after this debate and have a cocktail. Enjoy the best of Nashua. But to help kind of set the stage a little bit in terms of what the Lincoln-Douglas debates were all about and the history behind them, we've asked a student from Rivier University, a senior by the name of Maria Dominguez, to please come to the stage and share a little history on the Lincoln-Douglas debates and the context behind those debates. And the reason we've asked her to do that is because it will help give you a little better understanding of what to expect this evening as we talk with Mr. Lamontagne and Ms. Hassan. Maria, would you please join me on the stage to share a little with us about the Lincoln-Douglas debates?
Thank you, Chris. Good evening. As mentioned before, tonight's style of debate is based on the 1858 Illinois senatorial debates between Stephen A. Douglas and Abraham Lincoln. The Lincoln-Douglas debates were a series of 7 debates that took place in 7 of the congressional districts of Illinois. Each debate was 3 hours long, as Chris mentioned, and were widely attended by not just Illinois residents, but residents of other states who traveled hours and sometimes even days for the opportunity to listen to at least one of the 7 debates. The Lincoln-Douglas debates were important and continue to be important because they not only touched upon issues that affected the state of Illinois, but issues that concerned the entire nation as a whole. Also, these debates did something more. They took those issues, for example, slavery, and discussed the morality behind it. In other words, instead of discussing where slavery should be allowed in the newly acquired territories after the Mexican-American War, they discussed whether slavery was a right or a wrong. Should it be in the course of ultimate extinction, as Abraham Lincoln believed, or was it a continuing process that would never die, as Stephen Douglas believed? Both Lincoln and Douglas took their own personal morals and values and defended their arguments based off them. This is something that we would like to see tonight. We would like to hear the candidates' reasons, more specifically, the values that each candidate has in regards to the issues that will be discussed today. We would like for Ms. Hassan and Mr. Lamontagne to not only give us an ordinary political argument, but to deliver a political argument with a spin. We would like them to defend their arguments through the values that they grew up with, those values that ultimately led them to the arguments that they stand for today concerning certain issues that affect New Hampshire and the United States, the same way the legendary Abraham Lincoln and Stephen A. Douglas did during those 7 3-hour debates back in 1858. Thank you.
Maria, thank you very much for that. And I hope you got a chance to really listen carefully to what she said, because it does help prepare all of us for what we can expect here tonight. As I said earlier, this is a very loosely formatted Lincoln-Douglas debate. What we mean by that is that we are asking the candidates this evening to not just share their positions on policies, but share those values, the values that help them arrive at their positions on their policies. So as they debate education, or taxes, or protecting New Hampshire's quality of life, listen for the values that they share with you that led them to what their positions are on each of them. Each of them sometimes arrive at very different positions on the same policy, and yet their values can sometimes be the same, sometimes they can be different. So be listening for some of that tonight. And if you hear that, you'll walk away with a very high-quality experience here, and we hope that you do in the spirit of higher education and transforming the hearts and minds, not just of us, but of the world here at Rivier University. I think you're in for a real treat this evening. We had a coin toss to determine who would go first. And Mr. Lamontagne won the coin toss, and he has deferred the first response. He deferred the first response to Ms. Hassan. So as I go through these questions, the very first one, Ms. Hassan will have a chance to respond first, followed by Mr. Lamontagne, and then we will go back to Ms. Hassan, and then finally, the last word on that question will be given to Mr. Lamontagne. As we go to the second question, we will flip that order, and we will keep flipping back and forth. Just to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of format tonight, we are following a 5-3-3-5 format. 5-3-3-5. That means the first responder gets 5 minutes to respond to the question. The second responder gets 3 minutes. We go back to the first for a 3-minute rebuttal. And then that second responder gets the final 5 minutes. 5-3-3-5. That allows us about 16 minutes per question. Over 90 minutes, we'll get through 5 questions. If they go quickly, we'll get to a 6th bonus question. I'd like to first introduce Mr. Lamontagne since he won the coin toss. Mr. Lamontagne is a fourth-generation Granite State native and a resident of Manchester, where he is a business lawyer and shareholder with Devine, Willamette, and Branch. His volunteer work in the charitable and nonprofit communities is extensive and includes Easter Seals, New Hampshire, the Governor's Commission on Domestic Violence, and his role as former chairman of St. Mary's Bank Board of Directors. Ovid was honored in 2009 as New Hampshire's Distinguished Citizen of the Year by the Daniel Webster Council, Boy Scouts of America. Ovid is also the past chairman of the State Board of Education. Ovid and his wife Betty have two daughters, Madeline and Brittany. And when not at home, Ovid might be found at the family camp on Lake Umbagog, located north of Berlin, where he enjoys hunting, fishing, hiking, and snowmobiling. Ovid, would you please join me on the stage? Thank you, sir. Listen right here. Maggie Hassan began her career in public service in 1999 when Governor Jeanne Shaheen asked her to serve as an advocate on the Advisory Committee to the Adequacy in Education and Finance Commission. Her experience as an attorney, along with her role as the parent of two children, one of them who has severe disabilities, enabled her to provide a unique perspective as the commission did its work. In 2004, Maggie was first elected to the New Hampshire State Senate. During her 6 years in office, she was selected by her colleagues to serve as both the President Pro Tem and Majority Leader of the State Senate. In 2010, Business New Hampshire magazine named Maggie one of the state's most powerful people. Maggie earned her BA from Brown University and a JD from the Northeastern School of Law. She lives in Exeter with her husband Tom, the principal of Phillips Exeter Academy, and has two adult children, Ben and Meg. Maggie, will you join us on stage? Very nice to have you. As I said earlier, we'll start with question 1, and Ms. Hassan will get the first response on this question. Are we ready?
Hold on just a second. One of the things that happens when you're a little bit shorter than average is you stand on something behind the podium, so I'm just checking the microphone. There you go. Okay.
All right. First question. Please share with us the top 3 reasons why the city of Nashua is the best in New Hampshire. Totally kidding. Totally kidding.
Because Donnelly is mayor. There you go.
Agreement right now. We're agreed.
Seriously. Ms. Hassan, the state of New Hampshire competes on a national scale when it comes to quality of life indicators and ease of doing business, thanks to our resident-friendly tax structure, a relatively balanced regulatory environment for businesses, and high levels of education. Yet, we see statistics pointing to high business taxes, an aging population, and an outmigration of young workers to other parts of the country. Please outline your vision for strengthening New Hampshire's position and address the challenges that could reduce our competitive edge in the years to come. Please contrast your vision with that of your opponent. And you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. First of all, Sister Paula, thank you so much, and to Rivier College for having us, to Ovid for agreeing. And Ovid and I always agree to call each other by our first names, so we'll continue that tradition here. I also just want to take a minute to thank my mom for being here. That's Peggy Wood in the second row. It's always nice to have your mother in the audience. As the introduction indicated, Tom and I live in Exeter with our 2 children, and we have absolutely loved raising our family here. This is a remarkable place. New Hampshire's way of, in particular, including our son Ben, in civic life and in schools, really speaks to the culture here, the culture that says citizens can come together and they can, by working hard and advocating for each other, really bring people who have historically been at the margins, Ben has severe physical disabilities, into the heart and soul of community. And we do that in New Hampshire in all sorts of ways, formal and informal. It's an all-hands-on-deck kind of state. Everybody has a role to play. And that's what makes us unique more than anything else. So what we've learned as Ben's family, Ben is now 24, he's an Exeter High School graduate, he is smart and he is funny. What we've learned is that when you work together and when you stick together, you can overcome your challenges, no matter how daunting they are. And that's the attitude I've brought to public service in 6 years at the State Senate, working very closely with Governor Lynch in particular during my time there on a number of issues, particularly ones that affect our economy, our quality of life, and in fact dealing with the real challenges that this state has had since the economic crisis of 2008. So a couple of thoughts. I have an innovation plan that really speaks to the fact that we have so many great advantages in New Hampshire that we need to build on and refresh. And part of what we need to do is look forward, reverse some of the decisions that this legislature has made in the last 2 years, and then make sure that we are attracting innovative businesses here so that they can create jobs, jobs that will keep people here and attract people here. And all of that builds a better and better economy. When you go around and talk to businesses in New Hampshire, I was at Goss International in Durham this morning. I was right here in Nashua yesterday at BAE Systems. And when you talk to employers, what they are most concerned about right now is making sure that they can find skilled workers. And so our innovation plan focuses on that. It focuses first and foremost on making sure that we have an education system that is set up and aligned with 21st century business needs so that we can train people for the jobs of today and the jobs that we'll need tomorrow. So we propose restoring the funding to the university system that this legislature cut. And in exchange for restoring that cut, you may recall that this legislature cut the university system by about 50% in the last session, driving up tuition for our middle class families by 8 to 10%, well, for all families who are attending UNH. And we want, in exchange for that restoration of funding, we want to freeze tuition so that our New Hampshire students can afford to stay in state and get their education here. They're much more likely to stay here when they do that. That's item one. We also have asked the university system to open up more spots or reserve more spots for New Hampshire students at the university and all our state colleges. We also know that businesses need incentives to bring research and development here. So we would double the research and development tax credit in New Hampshire, something that I sponsored when I was in the state senate. And then we know that our small businesses in particular need technological assistance. So we want to make sure that we are using our education system, our university system, its business expertise, its innovation incubators to aid small businesses in particular so that they can get the kind of technological assistance they need. And our system also, our plan also calls for increasing aid for exports, helping our businesses develop international trade, grow their markets that way. When we do all of these things, and it's a 9-point plan, we also need to improve our standards K through 12, especially in science and math, and have more hands-on learning. When we do all those things, we will grow our economy, we will stay competitive. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Hassan. I will take a quick moment logistically here just to remind our candidates we do have an aide for you here in terms of time. Maria is right here in the front row. I neglected to remind you of that earlier, so you can watch her for time cards. And Maggie, great job on the time. That was spot on.
Well, the cards helped.
Absolutely.
Good job.
Ovid, would you like me to repeat the question, or are you good?
No, I think I have the question. Thank you, Chris. And first of all, thank you to the newly renamed Rivier University community for hosting this wonderful debate opportunity for us. And I want to congratulate you, Sister Paula Marie, and the Board of Trustees, and the community for achieving this recognition as a university. And just in the interest of full disclosure, I'm very proud of the Sisters of the Presentation of Mary, who founded this wonderful college, now university, here in Nashua. And one of my relatives, my aunt, Sister Guy Marie, is a member of the order. She now is in England helping with their province there. But I'm very fond of this university for what it's done for the community here in the state, and certainly for the personal ties I have with it. New Hampshire is an exceptional state, and it's become, and it has been an exceptional state because of the people who live here and who've worked here and who've sacrificed here to give us the state that we now enjoy. I'm a fourth generation New Hampshire native, the son of New Hampshire farmers, mill workers, and dentists. My great-grandfather, Ovid Lamontagne, I have him to thank for this crazy name of mine. He settled in Rochester, purchased the family farm in 1891, worked in the mills part-time, and maintained a working farm. And that farm is still in our family. My Aunt Virginia Lamontagne lives there now. But it was a source of strength for our family. I find strength in people, but I also find strength in places. Places of our granite state. Places that are not controlled and manipulated by government, but places where people live in community with one another. Stick together. I think of my grandfather Brisson. He was the oldest of 14 children born in Manchester in a triple-decker. He worked his way through 8th grade. Spent his life working in the mills of Manchester. Decided that he would not get married until he raised enough money or saved enough money to build a little house for his family. And I remember visiting with him one day with my family on a Sunday afternoon, and my grandfather sitting in a rocking chair listening to the Red Sox. And I said, "Pepe, how come you have a driveway but you don't have a car?" He stopped rocking and he looked at me and said, "Ovid, I don't have a driver's license because I can't afford a car. But I have that driveway there, so when your family comes to visit, your father has a place to park his car. And every one of my 5 kids went to college so they could have a better life." That man never asked anything of government. He never asked anything of anyone except his family. That's the rugged individualism that's made us strong. We have to work in partnership with government, but we have to look at the world and opportunity through the lens of individual responsibility, hard work, and self-sacrifice, and a commitment to leaving this state in a better place than we found it. That's what makes New Hampshire exceptional, and that's the kind of ethic I'll work to build on as governor of the state of New Hampshire.
Thank you. Maggie, you have 3 minutes.
Sure. I want to talk a little bit, part of Chris's question to us was to contrast our positions from our opponents. And so I want to talk a little bit about the really stark choice we have in this election. I've talked about the innovation plan we have. I've talked about some of the points, making sure that we are doing everything we can to build a strong innovation-based economy that will attract companies here, keep workers here, and keep young people here. Because as you look at the latest reports that have come out, one that just came out today, some of the concern is that people are leaving our state. So we need to make sure that our infrastructure, both our education and our physical infrastructure and our virtual infrastructure, broadband for instance, are strong enough, robust enough, flexible enough, so that businesses will want to come to our state. When you look at what I worked on in the state Senate with Governor Lynch, in addition to balancing budgets, making tough choices in tough economic times, I'm also very proud that I helped create the job training program that today has trained 14,000 workers in New Hampshire for new or better jobs. I'm very proud of the work we did to create New Hampshire Working, which allowed businesses and workers to fight the recession together in 2009 and 2010 in particular. It allowed businesses to reduce an employee's hours, but the employee could get some help from the unemployment fund in the state to stay on the job. That helped employees weather the recession and businesses retain a trained workforce as the upturn came back and they needed people back on full time. I'm very proud of the fact that in the state Senate, I helped pass an education funding law that ended 15 years of lawsuits and brought kindergarten to every child, because every child needs a great start for their education in our state. That's in sharp contrast with the ideas that my opponent talks about. He opposes public kindergarten. His one accomplishment as chair of the Board of Education was to reject millions of dollars of federal money, New Hampshire's fair share of its tax money, for our local schools. And today, with budget cuts that this legislature that my opponent supports put in place, Manchester schools have as many as 40 kids in a classroom, something that is unsustainable. We shouldn't be warehousing children today in their classrooms. We should be engaging them in hands-on education so that they can be the workers and the creators and the entrepreneurs of tomorrow. So those are some of the differences between us.
Over to you, 5 minutes to respond.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I believe in speaking the truth, not in speaking about myths. The situation of Manchester has nothing to do with the state budget. And that's a fundamental difference that we have going forward. If you look at Maggie's record as a state senator, she supported over 99 fee increases in taxes in her tenure. She oversaw the exponential growth by New Hampshire standards of state spending by 24% while she was in leadership in state government. She supported initiatives like requiring the state or encouraging the state to participate with the Obamacare or Affordable Care Act takeover by the federal government. She supported an income tax on small businesses called an LLC tax, a tax that was brought into the budget in the dark hours of the night without an opportunity for public hearing. That is not the way we should be doing business in New Hampshire. We need transparency and we need truth. And that's the kind of governor I would be. The issues are stark. And there's not issues that are personal, they're issues that are stark. I don't believe the Supreme Court of the state of New Hampshire should sit in judgment over the legislature and the cities and towns and the school districts of our state and control education, which is why I support an amendment to our Constitution that reverses the Claremont decisions and restores local control over education policy and funding. Maggie opposes that. She's happy with the way things are right now in terms of the court's imposition of control over education. That is not acceptable to me. Maggie supported an income tax when she first ran for public office in 2002. I have never supported an income tax. I support an amendment to the Constitution which would prohibit an income tax for future generations. Maggie opposes that. She wants to leave it on the table, like gas taxes, which she talked about last week, increases in tolls on the table. I think we have a spending challenge and we need to reform state government by being fiscally responsible, living within our means, not raising taxes and taking more freedom and liberty from our people. That's what taxation is, you know. It's not an investment, it's tax and spend. That's the truth. And there's a fundamental difference in the way I would serve as governor. I would be pro-business because I know the private sector is where real jobs come from. As a business lawyer and a business owner, I know that. As chairman of the board at St. Mary's Bank, a $750 million financial institution, with commercial lending and mortgages and financial products for our citizens and our businesses, I know it's the private sector that creates good jobs. So I stand for regulatory reform. I'm going to put a 90-day moratorium on the first day on any new rules and regulations and require an economic impact analysis, a true economic impact analysis, to be performed by our agencies before they promulgate rules and regulations. And I'm going to launch into real zero-based budgeting. Now today Maggie proposes a panel of experts to decide what the revenues of the state should be. We don't have a revenue estimating problem in this state. We, in fact, are within 1% of the revenue estimates that this legislature projected and predicted. Why are we fixing or focusing our attention on issues that are not a problem? Spending is the problem. And an inefficient government. Do you know what our law provides in New Hampshire? That we're supposed to present a maintenance budget. How many businesses present maintenance budgets, continue to do what they've been doing 2, 4, 10 years before, simply to perpetuate something that may be very inefficient, outdated? But that's what our law provides. I want to change that approach and to say to our agencies, what do you need to accomplish the next 2 years? What is it going to take to get there, and what's the most efficient way to get there? And recreate the budget from zero, from ground up. And then when it comes to business development and economic development, I want to work with our business leaders in the state to develop what we don't have right now. And that's a statewide economic development plan that looks at the regions of the state for opportunities and challenges. I had breakfast up in Colebrook in mid-February with some business leaders, and I'm sitting at Howard's restaurant, and I said, why is it that when I call an 800 number for a product that's not working well in my home, I end up in India, not Colebrook? And the answer was because we don't have broadband high-speed internet here. I said to the bank president who was at that breakfast, how much would it cost to put that platform here? He said about $600,000 for our region. I said, we're going to get that done. Why isn't it been done? He said, a failure of leadership. I believe in governing to the need, not governing to the averages. And that's what the people of New Hampshire expect. Our approaches are fundamentally different, and you'll hear more of that, I'm sure, as the night goes on.
Thank you, Ovid. That's our first question. How's everyone doing? Good. All right. Maggie, you get the first response on this next question. You'll have 5 minutes. Oh, I'm so sorry, Ovid. Excuse me. Ovid, you get 5 minutes. First response. In New Hampshire, we shoulder extremely high health insurance premiums. The passage of national health care reform, upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court this past summer, means that national health care reform will progress for the next several years, resulting in significant changes to how individuals, families, and companies approach their health insurance options. Our state legislature and executive council took steps this past year to reject federal dollars earmarked for compliance with those reforms. As governor, do you support the actions of our legislature and executive council? And what, if anything, would you do differently to lower the cost of health care in New Hampshire?
Well, thank you, Chris, for that question. This is an area about which I have experience. I've served the last 14 years as outside general counsel at Catholic Medical Center, one of our state's leading hospitals. I helped represent Catholic Medical Center in reestablishing itself as an independent Catholic hospital in Manchester after a failed merger, some of you may recall, Optima Health in Manchester. I went on to represent Franklin Regional Hospital in merging with Lakes Region General Hospital based on the experience of that failed merger. And I come from a medical family. As I said, I'm the son of dentists. Actually, my grandfather's a dentist, my dad's a dentist, my brother's a dentist. My brother, Denny's a podiatrist. He says, Dad, we're going to get him from both ends. You know? He's a lot younger than I am. But I have the experience in watching medical care providers, physicians and dental hygienists and everyone from the hospital president to the individual provider struggle through the system of ours. And I recognize several things that probably you sense instinctively. The federal government right now has too much control over health care in New Hampshire. If you look at any hospital budget, about half of it is basically federal reimbursement, either through the Medicaid program, which is a state-federal partnership, or Medicare. And the rules and regulations that come with those programs affect the rest of the healthcare sector. So, if you're only recovering 80 cents on the dollar on a hospital level, where do you make up the difference to have a balanced budget? From the private payer side. You have to go to health insurers, private insurers, and actually charge them higher rates in order to make up the difference. And what have we done here in New Hampshire? What we did in the mid-90s is to drive out competition in our healthcare system. We adopted community rating. We went to a one-size-fits-all mandate approach for health insurance. There is no risk now in our premium setting for the most part. It's not, why, do you ever ask yourself why it is that you can buy auto insurance that your premium is going to alter based on whether you're a safe driver or not? That you can call an 800 number and in 15 minutes say 15%, right? Did you ever hear anybody say that to you about health insurance? No, you don't, because we've changed the system, the delivery system ourselves too, but also because of federal overreach before the Affordable Care Act. So we need a New Hampshire-based approach. We need to modify and amend our laws so we have more competition through the health insurance marketplace. Change community rating so there's truly risk-based premium setting. Allow employers to risk pool, into the marketplace to have purchasing power. Decouple insurance purchase from the employer sector. Let individuals enter into a larger risk pool if they like. And then create incentives that will lower premiums based on the healthy life we live and so forth. There is a New Hampshire way that we should go forward on. Now, I agree with Governor Lynch. In 2009, Governor Lynch, through a spokesman, was very skeptical about turning over our healthcare system to Medicaid and the federal government. And you understand that's what this is about. The Affordable Care Act does two principal things. First of all, it mandates that you have to buy insurance or else you pay a tax. And the Supreme Court has settled that. It is a tax. Secondly, it requires the states to open up their Medicaid system, which is designed to provide health insurance to the poor, senior citizens, and individuals with special needs. Betty and I have been foster parents of a special needs young man for 24 years. We know the system. That system is not designed to bring in 50, 80,000 new lives because government compels it. And the Supreme Court said, you know what, you can't mandate that, federal government. The states have to elect whether or not they want to move into that sector. What I say is let's use our bargaining position to negotiate with the federal government that they would block grant the enhanced monies that would be paid to the state under the Affordable Care Act and let us develop a high-risk pool, a private insurance exchange, the New Hampshire way. And we'll set minimum standards that will be held accountable to the federal government to the extent this law continues. But I refuse to accept the proposition that we need to turn over our hospitals, our providers to the federal government, because Washington planners never know better than we do right here in New Hampshire how to take care of our citizens, whether it comes to health care or education. And we'll hear about that too. The decision made last year, I think, was the right one. It was before the court had ruled. Now let's move forward and start to negotiate in earnest with the federal government. But let's make sure that they understand we're not just turning over the keys to the hospitals and the healthcare providers of our state. And we're going to bring New Hampshire reforms to cover more lives, all lives, improve access, and lower cost.
3 minutes, Maggie.
Thank you for the question. And Ovid and I share a bit of history here, or a bit of similar experiences. I too have represented hospitals both as in-house counsel and outside counsel for well over 15 to 20 years. And I too come from a family of doctors, so it's nice to have that in common. Where we differ is the way we approach the very real need to make sure that for purposes of economic security and personal security, that every Granite Stater has access to high-quality, affordable health care. I've led on this in the state Senate. In my very first term as a member of the minority party, I got a coalition of Republicans and Democrats together to stop a law that is very similar to the one that Ovid now would like to reinstate, which allowed insurance companies to discriminate against sick workers. We got a coalition of us together to bring back something that's called adjusted community rating to the state, so that if you happen to be a small business with an employee who happened to get cancer, you wouldn't have your health insurance premiums raised as much as 300%, which is what was happening. So it was a very important step to make sure that all of our citizens and all of our small businesses had access to health insurance. In the state Senate as well, I led in making sure that young adults could stay on their parents' health insurance to age 26, well before the federal government passed that in the Affordable Care Act. And just last weekend, a former constituent of mine said that her neighbor's daughter was saved $40,000 in medical expenses because of that law we passed, because her daughter wouldn't have been able to stay on her health insurance. Her daughter got an illness, incurred medical care, and because of the work we did, she doesn't have $40,000 of debt today that she would have had. What I'm very concerned about when I hear Ovid talk about Medicare and federal programs is the fact that he has supported Paul Ryan, now the Republican Vice President nominee's voucher care program. He has said that he wants to have New Hampshire run health care for our seniors through our legislature, with this legislature, which voted, as you know, the House voted to opt out of Medicare this spring. He would have the legislature run Medicare for our seniors, a program funded by their hard-earned dollars. This is one of the ways those Medicare dollars gets returned to them. There are practical implications to that. If we opt out of Medicare, for all of the seniors in New Hampshire who might want to travel, for instance, to Florida in the winter, all of a sudden you go down to Florida and you don't qualify for Medicare down there because New Hampshire's got its own unique system. At the end of the day, this is about whether it's better to have the state and federal government working with its citizens to try to negotiate on behalf of those citizens affordable quality health care, or whether you're all going to be given a voucher for a certain amount of money and said when you get a diagnosis in the doctor's office, not only do you have to worry about what kind of treatment you're going to get, how you're going to handle this with your family, whether you can keep working, but now you've got to go and negotiate with an insurance company or with a provider for your care too. I don't think that's the way we should be asking human beings suffering from illness to deal with the provider medical system.
3 minutes.
Thank you. And I think you're starting to see yet again a point of departure here. Like I said before, I trust the people of New Hampshire, the providers in New Hampshire, the leaders in healthcare in New Hampshire to design the system that works best for our citizens. And it is absolutely untrue that if Medicare were to be managed directly with the federal government but by state policymakers in New Hampshire, that it would not be portable. Of course it's portable, like any private insurance is today. And if you go to another state, you get covered. The same thing with Medicare, that would be the case. But what's more fundamentally different is this. As a state leader, before the Affordable Care Act, Maggie sponsored legislation which has been called Maggie Care. governments run healthcare in New Hampshire. She believes we should have government setting prices in healthcare. That is not the way it should be. It's a fundamentally different approach. And fortunately, your colleagues gutted the bill and made it a study committee. I don't know if the studies come back, but the point is you wanted to turn over more control to government over what should be essentially a private delivery system. That's what works best. Ask yourselves where the hospitals are located in the state and how they got here. There are 2 hospitals in Nashua, not because government compelled it, but because the people cobbled the resources together to found hospitals here, to recruit doctors and physicians. That local control of healthcare is critically important. Government control, whether it's at Concord or in Washington, is not the right direction to go in. And then as State Senator, Maggie sponsored legislation to increase taxes on healthcare providers, particularly on senior citizens and the beds that were there. Again, looking to take more money from the private sector to fund bigger government. And the Maggie Care bill would have been funded through taxes on our hospitals and on our providers. That is not the direction we should be going into. I think it's important that we really step back and ask ourselves the question, who knows best about how to care for our citizens? Is it the people next door in your community that you know? Or is it the people in Washington who have no idea who they are? Ask yourselves, do you want to know your physician? Do you want to choose to go to your doctor? Or do you want some intermediary telling you whether or not you can go to that doctor? The Affordable Care Act puts government and the IRS between you and your providers. And you know better. You know best. You should have control over your healthcare future. And as governor, I'm going to work every day when it comes to healthcare reform to make sure that we're moving to empower our citizens, that we're moving to contain costs, improve quality through choice and transparency, through options, working with the private sector, but not by one-size-fits-all government approach. That was Maggie's approach as a state senator. That's Congress's approach right now. We need a better way, and we're going to get a better way.
Maggie, you have 5 minutes for the last word.
Yep. Well, we'll have another point of departure because, of course, Republicans and Democrats sponsored the bill that Ovid is speaking about as Maggie Care, and it passed unanimously out of the state Senate because it was focused on the very things that Ovid is talking about, which is transparency and accountability to make sure that our very high health care costs in New Hampshire come down. I talked a little bit in my previous remarks about the importance of having health care for every Granite Stater for purposes of our economic security and our personal security, and because it's the right thing to do. Which one of us here in the current, but before we took steps to make sure that people had access to health care, which one of us would want to be unemployed and all of a sudden get sick, or have one of our children get sick, with a system run by private insurance companies that wouldn't insure people with pre-existing conditions? Thanks to the Affordable Care Act, children with pre-existing conditions now are covered. Which one of us would want right now to have to figure out, among the 25 or so hospitals in New Hampshire, which one to go to in terms of quality and cost? We've taken some steps through the state insurance department to post some prices online and some quality measures, but the bill I suggested and passed in the Senate was aimed directly at making sure that our healthcare providers had to have transparency in their financing and had to publicly explain why their charges were what they were. Why? Because there was a 70% variation in charges for the same procedure between and among New Hampshire's hospitals. And nobody could tell us why. Nobody could tell us why. It seemed to me, and it seemed to my colleagues who supported the bill, that if you are performing an essential public function, which healthcare is, we all need it. Our economy needs it. Our families need it. If you have that essential function being delivered by private not-for-profits, that they should at least explain what's driving their costs up so we can all work together to make our health care more affordable in this state. It is the other thing I hear about from businesses all around the state. They tell us they need a skilled workforce, and they tell us they need affordable health care, and that the cost of health care is making it harder and harder for them to compete internationally. So I'm very proud of the work that I did to make sure that we understand what our cost drivers are in New Hampshire, why we are one of the most expensive places in the country to get health care, even though much of our health care is high quality. And we're doing great work at Dartmouth, great research in the state that is helping us learn how to change our delivery system, how to coordinate it better, how to make sure we change the incentives so that doctors and providers are rewarded for good quality care, not just for the number of procedures they do or the number of patients they see. So we're making progress. It's progress we began while I was in the state Senate, but we need to continue it. The thing that I am most concerned about when I hear Ovid talk about his plans for health care is he doesn't tell you what it is he would change about New Hampshire's current protections for consumers in health care, or how he would go about running the Medicare program for our seniors. When I talk about voucher care that Ovid supports, it's not my words about the difficulty for patients or for seniors going from state to state. It's the New Hampshire Council for Aging that has opposed his plan because they think it presents real care challenges and real logistical and practical challenges and financial hardship for New Hampshire seniors. That's of concern. And so as we think about health care, as we think about Ovid's plan, as we think about what we'll do with the Affordable Care Act, the American Association of Actuaries has said that if we turn down the federal Medicaid money, it will increase insurance premiums in this state and in any state that doesn't accept the Medicaid money for those who have private insurance. So it's something we have to consider carefully. 36,000 people in New Hampshire who earn $15,000 or less would be covered under the Affordable Care Act Medicaid provisions, and the government would pay first the feds 100% of it and then 90% of it. That's worth looking at seriously, because think of how much more competitive we would be and how much more our overall healthcare costs would come down if those 36,000 people had access to preventive and primary care. So it explains a very basic difference. I think if we all work together, we can solve this problem, we can increase access and lower costs and be a healthier, stronger state as a result.
Maggie, the next question comes to you first. Compared to many other states, the governor of New Hampshire wields relatively limited powers. What's so bad about that? No, just kidding. Despite oversight by an executive council, 2-year terms, and the absence of a line item veto, the governor remains the highest office in the state and attracts strong candidates from both parties, such as both of you here this evening. If elected, what values will guide you, and how do they differentiate you from your opponent tonight?
Thank you for the question. One of the amazing things about New Hampshire is that we have this incredible citizen legislature and this incredibly accessible corner office. It is so different than other states. If I am fortunate enough to become this state's governor, I look forward to fostering the kind of discussion and good faith problem solving that throughout the 6 years I was in the state Senate, I witnessed on a daily basis. First and foremost, the governor sets the tone for the state. I have been very concerned and disturbed by this legislature's behavior and actions over the last 2 years. A legislature with leadership that I regret to say my opponent has supported and praised. It's a leadership that has literally shut the citizens of New Hampshire out of the gallery of the New Hampshire House, despite the fact that our Constitution says all people behaving decently shall be allowed in that gallery. They were shut out during the budget hearings in the New Hampshire House in March of 2011, and it took a couple of us to actually go to court to be allowed back in. We shouldn't have that kind of leadership in our citizen legislature, and no governor should stand for it, as Governor Lynch didn't at the time either in supporting those of us who pushed to open up the gallery. It's not an accident right now that the Colbert Report and Jon Stewart makes fun of the New Hampshire legislature. And that's one of the things that we have to restore, is a civil tone, a respect for each other, and a realization that democracy is the process by which people, especially in New Hampshire, citizens who are earning $100 a year as legislators, come together and in good faith work together, sharing their differences and their tensions to move the state forward with concrete solutions to the challenges we face. What I hope, in addition to changing the tone, the first and most important task of a governor is to keep her state safe. So I would obviously focus on the safety issues, the response to natural disasters that we always need to be attentive to. But then the question is, what kind of concrete solutions can we together make so that we move the state forward? We know from a whole lot of data that's being shared just this week in a bunch of different reports that we need to attract young people to the state and keep the young people we have here so that we'll have the workforce of tomorrow and the vibrant communities that young families bring to the state. We need to be attracting businesses. That's why I have an innovation plan that will make sure that we're bringing innovative businesses here to start and then keeping them here to grow. We need to be developing partnerships with our business community, with our workers, with our state agencies. That's one of New Hampshire's great gifts. And the governor can make consensus building the focus of what she does. It's something I did in the state Senate and will continue to do as governor. Because more than anything else, we have a real choice in this election. We can choose to go the way of this legislature, which has dismantled everything from our university system to our roads and our bridges. Our infrastructure funding is got a big gap. We have a road we need to build. We need to look at whether we can bring rail to Nashua. I got stuck in traffic coming here. My sympathies to all of you. But it's a serious point. Those are the kinds of things that a governor can have great influence on if she brings people together, if they have a chance to talk with each other, if they have a chance to walk in each other's shoes a bit. The other thing I'd have to say is that it is really important for any governor to welcome every single citizen into the decision-making process as full and equal citizens. And that is one place where Ovid and I differ. I think it is very important to let women make their own healthcare decisions, respect their own religious freedoms. And I think that that's a real difference. And if we don't trust women to make their own decisions, they're not welcome here. And they're not welcome to participate in our economy and our government in the same way as if we make sure that they understand that we respect their abilities to make their own judgments with their own God and their own conscience and their own families. And we also need to respect the rights of all people to marry who they please, because again, we want to attract all people of talent and energy to our state to participate fully in our economy. And that's another task that a governor needs to make sure she is focusing on, making everyone understand that they all count in New Hampshire as long as they will follow our laws and participate in good faith to move the state forward.
3 minutes. Okay.
Thank you, Chris. I think the question was about running for governor, serving as governor, and a weak form of governor, and what you can do for the people of the state of New Hampshire. And I am running for governor, not the legislature. My friends in the legislature are here. I look forward to working with you, given the chance to serve. But I'm a former social studies teacher. I'm a practicing attorney in New Hampshire. I know, and I think a lot of you studied this in school, there are 3 branches of government: the legislative branch, the executive branch, the judicial branch. Legislative branch passes the laws, makes the laws. Executive branch oversees and implements the laws and oversees the management of government. Judicial branch applies the disputes of facts and dispute to the law, and the law to the facts and disputes to resolve problems among people over contracts and other issues. One of the problems we've had in New Hampshire is that we've allowed the executive branch to take too much power. Every time a bill is passed in the legislature that has rulemaking authority in it and says to an executive branch agency, you fill out the rest of the picture here, that's transferring legislative authority to the executive branch where it does not belong. As the governor of the state of New Hampshire, albeit a weak form of governor, you have the moral authority and with the right temperament to make a difference in terms of reordering the power base in New Hampshire government and then being someone who can work with the private sector. If I'm the governor of New Hampshire, I bring a vast amount of experience in business, working with our business leaders around the state, not just as a business lawyer, but as a business owner myself, having worked with the Chamber of Commerce, the BIA, on a number of initiatives. I know the leaders of our state who can make a difference in improving the quality of our economy and job creation. As the governor of the state of New Hampshire, I know our government. I served as legal counsel to the state senate, chairman of the State Board of Education, a member of the judicial branch. And then in the civic and charitable world, our New Hampshire state is exceptional in the way we partner, not take over, but partner government with the private sector to provide that safety net for our citizens through organizations like Easter Seals, the Moore Center, our area agency in Greater Manchester, or the Food Bank and other organizations, all of which I've worked with and many more. As the governor of New Hampshire, I will work with our leaders. And I'm pledging to the people of New Hampshire something about which I was criticized in my primary. The governor is nonpartisan. If I'm elected governor, I'm going to take a page out of Mel Thompson's book and put people above politics. I'll check my party label at the State House door, go into that governor's office with my conservative principles, and be a governor for all of the people. Whether you're a Republican, Democrat, Independent, Libertarian, come in, we'll work together. That is the way the governor should be.
3 minutes, ma'am.
The governor also has to decide what laws to sign or to veto. And the question for Ovid is, what kind of laws will he sign or veto? He signed a pledge to the Cornerstone Action Committee or research group that promises, among other things, to support the deregulation of insurance companies. Has repeatedly but opposed public kindergarten as recently as this summer. So if this legislature, the reason I talk about this legislature and its Tea Party nature is because it has tried to repeal kindergarten in the state. The question for Ovid is, as governor, would he repeal it? And he's indicated he would. That hurts our families and leaves them behind. This legislature defunded the university system by 50%, raising college tuition for our families. The question for Ovid is, would he sign that budget and support those kinds of cuts? He's talked about wanting to do a number of things, but where's he going to get the money? So is he going to sign a budget that does that kind of cut? Is he going to sign a bill or support the executive council that defunds Planned Parenthood? Planned Parenthood that provides basic health care to thousands of New Hampshire's men and women. Is he going to sign that? That's a question for the next governor. Is he going to continue to reject federal funds as he did as the chair of the Board of Education? Federal funds that our local schools needed. If he rejects those federal funds, does that mean he's going to support what this legislature has done, which is downshift hundreds of millions of dollars to our local communities and property taxpayers? Those are questions for the next governor, and that is a very, very important and critical piece of a governor's role. We have been so lucky that Governor Lynch has been in the corner office these last 2 years to protect the people of New Hampshire from some of the worst actions of this legislature. But I hope, and I have a record that tells me I'll be able to, I hope instead of having to be a veto governor, I'll be able to work with a legislature of people of both political parties, as I did throughout my career, to make sure that we are coming together and focusing on the needs of the people of this state and moving us forward, because I don't want to be a veto governor. I want to be a governor who can move this state forward, building on the work that I did with Governor Lynch that has served our state so well. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I think this is a very important question, obviously. It helps the voters to get a sense about who we are as people, what kind of public servant we'd be. One of the things I did when I ran for U.S. Senate, which I've done again running for governor, and that is to publish what I've called Ovid's Oath. It's a 10-point pledge to New Hampshire voters. It's on our website, ovid2012.com, O-V-I-D-E, don't forget the name, please, 2012.com. And there you'll see what I'm committing to the people of New Hampshire that I can have control over, against which you can evaluate my performance. One of the pledges in Ovid's Oath is a pledge that I'm taking voluntarily that is not required under a New Hampshire Constitution. The New Hampshire Constitution allows the governor to be disengaged from the legislative process, to sit back and let laws pass without his signature or her signature and become law. Other governors have done this. Governor Lynch did this. The last budget round, 2011, he submitted a budget to the legislature. Disengaged, let the legislature apply real math, not new math, to come up with reasonable, accurate revenue estimates and to tie spending decisions, not the same spending decisions I would make, by the way. And I was criticized in my primary for criticizing the legislature on some of the spending priorities it made and some of the things it did that I would not have done. But I would be involved because I'm pledging to the people of New Hampshire that I will sign or veto any bill that comes to me. I will act on those bills. And I won't just sit back and be disengaged. Governor Lynch watched from afar that legislature work to propose a budget to him. And he sent it to, he was sent that budget and he criticized it, complained about it, and let it pass without his signature. That is not leadership. We need leadership for a change in the governor's office. And I will be a leader, which means that the legislative leadership will know from the very beginning that they better find out where the governor stands on a piece of legislation. They better find out whether I can support it or not, because I will act. And those of you who know me know that I am a man of my word. And I will work with our legislative leadership on policy bills, on spending bills, to make sure we have the right result for the people of New Hampshire. And I'll be a governor that will make sure that it is clear what my agenda is. And I'll have a different agenda, I'm sure, than the legislature will. But that's the kind of dynamic we expect here in New Hampshire. And then more than that, the governor really is a small-town mayor in New Hampshire. You want to know the governor, and if you don't know the governor of New Hampshire, it's because you haven't tried to meet him or her. I have Governor Lynch's cell phone, and I've used it. I've used it on matters of, he supported a constitutional amendment to reverse the Claremont decisions and restore local control over education funding and policy making. And I've worked with him on that. I want to be a governor like Governor Lynch and being accessible, responding to floods and natural disasters and state celebrations. To be there when you're having a great event in Nashua, a great event at Rivier University, and I'll be there. But I'll also lead. And I'm going to reach out proactively to the business leaders of our state. I'm going to appoint a business advocate to the governor's office on day one, whose sole job it is will be to be an advocate in my name in working for businesses to troubleshoot through regulatory hold-ups, hang-ups, licenses or permits that aren't being awarded, difficulties that they're having, to cut through that red tape, to be proactive for them. That's the kind of governor the people of New Hampshire expect. And I will govern with decorum. There's no question that New Hampshire, like a lot of other places, is under a lot of stress. We kid ourselves if we don't believe for a minute that we aren't facing tough times. We are. The latest economic data shows that we're 30,000 jobs short of where we were in 2008 at the time of the Great Recession. Our population is aging. We have an outmigration of citizens. Young people are leaving us. New Hampshire should be where they stay because they have good jobs. That means leadership from the governor's office, working with the private sector and business, and having a pro-business approach. Maggie's approach is to tax and spend. 99 taxes and fees, and we're going to go through every one of them by the time November 6th comes. Every day we're letting people know what she supported. I refuse to allow a tax or fee increase over the next 2 years. We're going to level fund government. And then we're going to work to balance our budget by reforming state government and getting control of spending. We need more control and discipline on the spending side, and then to prioritize our spending correctly.
Thank you, Ovid. We're going to touch a little bit here on state budget deficits and spending and taxes related to that. In recent years, tremendous controversy has erupted over the state legislature's handling of potential budget deficits that resulted in cuts to an array of state-funded services. In your opinion, has the state made the right decisions with respect to its current budget? And what would you have done as governor to influence those budget decisions this past session? Ovid, you get the first response.
Well, I didn't anticipate that question, but it's very good. It kind of flows from where I was. Let me just go back to talk about how we should handle our budget. It is the first order of business that the governor will have to take care of, working with our legislative leadership. The governor submits a budget message by mid-February, not much time to move. And I'll pledge to you as well that come November 6th is the election. If I'm successful on November 6th, we start to work November 7th. And I'll reach out to Governor Lynch and try to work with his management team to effect an orderly transition as soon as possible. Be ready on day one to serve the people of New Hampshire. Now, the budget is something that's going to require, I believe, zero-based budgeting. Something that Governor Christie did in New Jersey. Be a different style, I'm sure. I'm not as affable or as genteel as he is. It'll be a different style, and we're going to go work with our leadership and the State Department agencies to determine which programs can be consolidated, which areas can be privatized, what opportunities exist to rethink the way we deliver state services. Look at our infrastructure. Our information technology system in the state government is antiquated. Do you know a lot of the state employees can't schedule a meeting by going on Microsoft Outlook calendar? Most of you are looking at me and thinking, are you kidding? No, I'm not kidding. They have to call through to different people to schedule a meeting. I don't know about you, but I've watched executive council meetings with Governor Lynch recently, where they all have their old little handheld calendars trying to schedule meetings. We're not going to function that way if I'm the governor. We're going to work to modernize our information technology platform. And I'm told by experts in the field that we could save $100 to $300 million a year in bureaucracy if we had a modern information technology delivery system. If we looked at our website in state government, have you looked at that recently? It is very difficult to navigate. It should not be difficult at all. And the private sector has the ability to work with our planners to make sure we move into that modern era. And then with zero-based budgeting, we're going to come back to the legislature and say, this is where our spending priorities should be. Now, in the last budget, I'll tell you what I've told people before throughout this last year. I would have funded the dish. That's a disproportionate share, which is part of the Medicaid enhancement tax mechanism that hospitals had entered into back in 1991. The result of the lack of funding of the dish means that hospitals laid off over 1,000 employees in healthcare throughout our state. Really pressed to try to meet the needs of the underserved, the poor who access healthcare through Medicaid. That's one area that I would have set as a priority. And there are other areas as well. Again, Betty and I have been foster parents of a special needs young man. I know what it's like for a family to have a person of special needs. And the waiting list, which is the transitional point where some young person moves out of the educational spectrum at 21 into adult behavioral services if they need it. That waiting list sometimes traps families and citizens into a place that they're held in limbo. That's very destabilizing, particularly with an individual with true special needs. And we should have fully funded the waiting list. Now, that's the kind of budget priority I would bring to budgeting, along with reforms, true reforms of state government. And that means rolling up the sleeves, working hand in hand with our policymakers, and really asking the second, third, and fourth questions about what our spending priorities should be in state government. And then we should be looking at what we actually do that should be helping business, because it's about jobs and job creation. So I'd say let's rename the marketing department of the state of New Hampshire from Dread to something else. And that is the name of our marketing department. Wonderful professionals working there, but they're hampered from the get-go by a name that sort of makes everyone pause. And we don't have that statewide economic development plan that we need to have. And we don't have the strategy in place that would help our businesses. I have a business reform tax mechanism that would be part of the budget. It creates a tax holiday for new jobs that are created in New Hampshire. New jobs, it's called the Jobs Production Tax Credit. It extends and makes permanent the Research and Development Tax Credit. It provides a tax credit for an employer who pays part or all of a student loan for a worker. There are a lot of initiatives we can undertake, and I will do that. And a lot of it begins right with the budget and the budget process. Thank you.
3 minutes back.
Thank you. Well, I've actually balanced the state budget with Governor Lynch in the worst economy since the Great Recession, since the Great Depression, when we had a recession. I made some of the tough choices with our colleagues to close programs, to close outdated facilities. We've managed to fully fund the disability wait list at the height of the economic crisis because we made and listed our priorities and made sure that we were working carefully and closely together to make those tough decisions. We balanced the budget. We ended the biennium of that last budget that I participated in with almost a $20 million surplus. We actually cut the general fund spending in the last biennium almost 5%, which is something that none of the predecessor governors, including Republicans, had done. Ovid campaigned with Governor Merrill over the weekend, and Governor Merrill, a Republican, was actually the person who instituted the business enterprise tax. So I think it's really important to look at what we've done as opposed to what we say. Chris Christie, who Ovid just extolled as a model, has cut $1 billion from local schools in New Jersey. So the question is that something that Ovid is going to do? I have a plan to reform our budget process. It starts with a consensus-based revenue panel of legislators and the governor's office and state agencies and economists, because we have a right as leaders to differ about priorities and philosophies, but we should have the same facts when we go into the budget process so that we can stop some of the gridlock that happens when people start arguing over revenue estimates. That's step one. Step two is to improve our audit process in state government. We do a lot of legislative audits, but then we don't implement them very well. So the plan I released today would make sure that we are auditing our biggest and most expensive departments, that's where you can get the most savings, but also that we're implementing that as we go. We also need to make sure that we hold our state government accountable and taxpayers know what they're getting for their money. So my plan that we announced today for budget reform also says we will work with state agencies to establish performance measures and then publish those performance measures and how we're doing online. I will note that there has been great improvement and integration and modernization of the state's computer platform, and as we speak, state agencies are working to break down the silos that have made our government inefficient. But at the end of the day, we can, without an income or sales tax, which I oppose, work together to make sure we make the tough decisions to improve state government, cut where we need to, but also make sure that we have the money that we need to fund our schools, fund our university system, fund our highways, fund the kind of broadband we need. Because when Ovid says he will never let any tax raise, no matter what, he isn't telling you what the cost of that is. Because businesses need an educated workforce, they need roads and bridges, they need a healthcare system that works, and they need good public schools. And if you're not going to pay for them, you should be upfront with people and tell them what you're going to cut.
As I said, we have to talk about the truth of the people of New Hampshire, and we're going to talk about the truth. Now, Maggie says she, as a leader in the state Senate, before she lost her race in 2010, she was a majority leader of the state Senate, so she knew exactly what was going on. That budget was not a budget that lowered spending, not by a long shot. And that budget was not balanced. That budget was only balanced through accounting gimmicks, a one-time takeover of funds, and bonding operating expenses for one time. That's the school building aid. And in addition, The reduction in general revenues or general fund spending was because they took the Liquor Commission offline and off budget. If you look at state spending, the truth is, under Maggie's leadership, we increased state spending in the middle of the Great Recession by 24%, leading up to and following it. And we had all sorts of proposals, which thankfully some of them were repealed, but some of them were not. The LLC tax is a classic example. Put in the dark of the night, right on the eve of the budget being actually adopted, and actually taxing the income of small business. It was called the LLC tax, and many of you remember this. There was a revolution happening among our small business community because of it. And when she was challenged at the Exeter Rotary about it, she said, well, we didn't do a good enough job explaining it to the people. No, you did the wrong thing by adopting that tax to begin with. And when it came to funding state government, Maggie was all too eager to take money out of the JUA, which is a private, not-for-profit insurance plan to provide medical malpractice coverage to our physicians of our state. Fortunately, the Supreme Court ruled that as an unconstitutional taking. There's no stopping where she'll go for new money. And I keep reminding the people, something you know intuitively. Every tax, every fee, every time government takes money from you and from us and from business, they're taking away some freedom and liberty from us. And we can't forget that. So the taking of that money needs to be based on good, sound policy and stewardship. Every time we waste one taxpayer dollar, it's a crime against the taxpayers. And we ought not to be going back to the tax well any more than we absolutely have to. And I still believe there is opportunity and promise in the existing budget that we have to find the resources that we need and to reform our state government, to put us into the top tier of the country. We have some wonderful opportunities in this state because we're small, because we know each other, and because we can make a difference. And with your help, I will make a difference for New Hampshire as a governor.
Well, you see some of the differences. And one of the things that Ovid still hasn't told you is what he's going to cut. Whether he, sitting in our seats in 2009, would have turned back the federal stimulus dollars that we accepted. The reason that he can use the statistic he did about increase in spending is simple. We accepted federal dollars, New Hampshire's fair share, that New Hampshire taxpayers had paid to the federal government. We accepted it back to keep teachers in the classroom, police on the streets. That's what we did with that stimulus money. We accepted that money to pave our roads and repair our bridges. The Memorial Bridge in Portsmouth, which has had to be shut down, some of those repairs are being funded with that stimulus money. And businesses are begging for us to do it because in Portsmouth, the business community is hurting terribly with the closure of the Memorial Bridge. So Ovid should tell us, would he have rejected that federal stimulus money just as he rejected federal money for our schools when he was chair of Board of Education? We did work very hard making difficult choices during that 2008-2009 budget cycle. We had hours of discussions with businesses and with community leaders and with citizens and with legislators about all different ways we could approach the fact that because of failed economic strategies that Ovid supports, we saw an economic collapse and a decline of our revenues that overnight went from 2008 levels to pre-2004 levels. So we worked really hard with the community, hours and hours, days and days. And the LLC issue that he talked about, we worked to close a loophole that would have held lawyers and accountants who got passive income from their LLCs to the same standard as other shareholders. And when we learned that that didn't work the way we intended it to, we repealed it. And I led the effort to repeal it. And one of the differences between Ovid and me is that as I watch what's actually happening on the ground, as I learn how things work or don't, I respond. That's the kind of leader I am. Ovid is still pushing the same outdated ideas that he started to run for office with 20 years ago, from criticizing public kindergarten to supporting vouchers for schools that go to institutions with no standards and that teach bad science, giving state tax dollars to private schools that have no standards or that teach that dinosaurs and humans walked the earth together 5,000 years ago isn't going to make our economy better. But that's still an idea that Ovid supports. When you talk about Medicare, Ovid is still talking about giving seniors vouchers at a cost of an additional $6,000 per year for seniors who will have to start paying for more and more of their own health care. Those aren't ideas that are going to move New Hampshire forward, and in fact, they will leave our families behind. There were a couple of other points there. I've worked with businesses too. We worked hard with businesses on that budget, again, getting lots of input, and we had to make very, very tough decisions. But at the end of the day, we did balance the budget. We did protect people. We did protect our economy. And we partnered with businesses and the community to make sure that we would have a state where citizens and businesses could still thrive and begin to grow their way out of the stimulus. That's out of the recession. That's the kind of work you have to do when you're actually in office, making hard decisions, having to balance the different needs and the different challenges that all of our citizens were facing during that critical time. I oppose an income or a sales tax, and I would veto one if it comes to my desk. And that's because I understand that the economy in New Hampshire is based around not having one. And we need a responsive and small government, and we need to continue to improve our government. But we also need to be fact-based about what's really happening, and we need to understand the balance that goes between investing and making sure that our businesses have the kind of educated workforce they need, the roads and bridges that they need, a healthcare system that can support our citizens and make sure that everyone gets the healthcare they need. At the end of the day, Ovid still hasn't told you what he's going to do to close the $90 million funding gap for our public transportation works, or how he's going to fund the $300 million in cuts that our hospitals experienced. He hasn't told you any of that, and that's because you have to actually understand the budget, look at the facts, and make tough decisions if you can lead.
Is this the bonus round?
We are at our last question for the night. Unfortunately, we won't get to the bonus round. Unless you want to stick around, we can debate it. For your last question, Maggie, this will be your first response to this last question. Let's take a look at transportation and infrastructure, which has arisen tangentially tonight so far. A strong majority of businesses and residents of New Hampshire support improved access to the Manchester Airport, which happened recently, as well as the renovation of the local Broad Street Parkway here in Nashua. Meanwhile, independent of that, state legislators clash over the need to expand passenger rail from Boston up to southern New Hampshire. What specific steps will you take as governor to bring a serious and rational focus to the question of expanding passenger rail into southern New Hampshire? Do you support the Executive Council's decision this past year to reject federal dollars to study the expansion of rail into New Hampshire? Maggie, you get 5 minutes.
Thank you. Well, we've talked a little bit about transportation, and again, Nashua, the congestion that I experienced driving down here gave me a little bit of a window into the issue of rail into Nashua. I certainly think it made sense to accept the federal money to study whether rail to Nashua should be an option for the state of New Hampshire. And I actually would hope that we would study whether we could bring rail up to Manchester, because if we did, we might have a Manchester International Airport, and think about what that would do for economic development in our state. Doesn't mean we will absolutely do it. We have to understand from the study not only what the economic benefits would be and what the quality of life and environmental benefits would be, but we also have to make sure that we're honest about what the cost would be. So We still need to look at it, but I would have accepted the federal money, and I think it was a terrible decision by the Executive Council not to do that. We also need to look at our transportation infrastructure, and we've talked about that tonight. One of the decisions this legislature made was to underfund our transportation infrastructure by $90 million. There are businesses on exit 4A on 93 in Derry waiting to find out if we are going to complete the widening of 93 before they make final business decisions. Try driving around in Salem, New Hampshire on a beautiful day in the summer when everybody's coming to Canopy Lake. It's so congested you can hardly drive there. I-93 needs to be widened. We need to find the resources to do it, particularly because not only is it a quality of life and quality of transport and business issue and economic issue for our state, it's also an issue of timing because the environmental permits for that project may run out before the funding comes in. And that would be a terrible additional delay that was completely unnecessary. So we need to look at infrastructure generally. We need to explore rail. Rail's been very successful in my part of the state. The Downeaster comes from Portland, Maine, goes through Exeter, goes down to Boston, and ridership has gone up as gas has gotten more expensive. And it's something that people in our part of the state really enjoy, and we're actually attracting families to our part of the state because they know that they have the option of commuting on rail. And so that's a really important factor as well. At the end of the day, we need to continue to work with businesses, with educators, with our citizens to make sure that we are attracting businesses here through our education system, through a good infrastructure. You know, CNBC did a survey this summer that changed our ranking as the 10th best economy in the country to the 34th, and they pointed to two things. They said we had slipped because the legislature cut the university funding by half, and because they cut our infrastructure spending as severely as they did. So when we talk about economic development, when we talk about attracting innovative businesses here, when we talk about recruiting people here, we need to make sure that we have all the pieces in place that make this a great place to live and to do business. And so that's part of the function that we have to look at as well. So those are some of my thoughts on the transportation infrastructure. It's something we need to find a way to strengthen in our state and to make sure that our infrastructure is not only business friendly but safe for our citizens.
Thank you. The focus of the question was on the rail and the study that was presented, or at least the opportunity to conduct a study, modern study, up-to-date study. That proposal, as I understood it, Chris, was to look at studying, expanding the rail and extending it not just to Nashua, but all the way to Concord. Now, this is a difference in approach that I would take than what I've seen before and I think what you've heard today. I would work with our Executive Council and the federal government to phase that study in. First of all, let's create the first phase, which is to see what it would cost to bring the rail right to Nashua without presupposing that it's an all or nothing proposition. The proposal that was before the Executive Council, as I understand was structured and presented, was all or nothing. You have to match up to $400,000 to study all the way to Concord. If it doesn't make sense to extend it to Nashua, then why would it make sense to study beyond that? And I think that's the kind of dynamic we need as a state with the federal government. The reason I push back on the federal government like I do, and like I did in the mid-90s, was because the federal government requires strings and conditions to be attached. And in the mid-90s, I turned back with my fellow board members on the State Board of Education Goals 2000 money that put more impositions on our state schools, on our teachers, without an adequate return, in my assessment. I was willing to push back, and I did. I'll do the same thing when it comes to this kind of program. I would have supported that study, but I would have worked with the federal government to make sure we understood that that money wasn't going to be spent entirely unless we phased it in. I do think we should look at seriously having Nashua serve as a terminus, if you will, for a rail system that would come up to southern New Hampshire. And then if the economics work out with real-world experience, seeing whether or not it makes sense to extend it to Manchester, which would be great. I live in Manchester, and I'd love to get on the train there, but not if it doesn't make economic sense to do it. We need to apply common sense, New Hampshire can-do analysis to these kinds of programs and this kind of infrastructure development. Now, when it comes to highways, our 10-year highway plan, I would tie and key the 10-year highway plan to a statewide economic development plan, which we don't have, to prioritize where we're going to spend our monies in terms of expanding infrastructure, repairing roads and bridges to coincide with where we think the need is for economic expansion and development. I think that's the approach we should take, and that's the approach I would take. And then going forward, Maggie tells you that the legislature underfunded transportation by $90 million. That's because they repealed a voter registration tax or fee that was imposed by her and her majority at the time on our citizens. And they repealed that. That's at a time when we were very much in economic distress, and that voter registration cost is regressive. That is her answer to what she said with respect to the underfunding in the last legislature. She supports restoring that voter registration fee.
Maggie, this will be your last 3 minutes for both this question and any closing statement that you may want to make.
Thank you. And I think, Ova, just for clarification, you meant vehicle registration fee, not voter registration fee. I didn't want voters to think that they were paying for roads and bridges.
True enough. Thank you.
So it was a vehicle registration fee. And, you know, here's the issue. Are we going to be upfront with people about the fact that roads and bridges cost money or not, right? Think about, a vehicle registration fee impacts those of us who register our cars, but think about the impact of not completing 93 on our businesses and on the jobs that are waiting right there because this legislature decided to repeal that fee. That's the kind of choices that Ovid won't tell you what side he's going to come down on when the rubber hits the road, so to speak, in this transportation issue. And it's an important discussion for us to be having, because we can't have a strong economy if we just put our head in the sand and pretend that things that we need don't cost any money. I want to close a couple of ways. First of all, we've talked a lot tonight about some details, but the big picture is this. We need to move this state forward. We have a great platform of work and success that we did with Governor Lynch in office. We made such good progress with programs like New Hampshire Working and our job training. We were rated the best state in the country to raise a child, the healthiest state, the safest state. Those are the kind of metrics that we need to pay attention to and attend to, because at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we are attracting businesses to our state that are innovative, that will be on the cusp of the kind of research and development that creates new industries and new jobs, that keeps young people here and that attracts young people to our state so that our economy is vibrant and it grows. With great respect to my opponent, changing the stationery at Dread isn't an economic plan. An economic plan is about working with our universities and with our educators at all levels to make sure that we have the skilled workforce we need for tomorrow. It's about targeted tax credits like the research and development tax credit, which I want to double. It's making sure that we have concrete, realistic proposals and solutions to the challenges we face that move our state forward, like the budget and efficiencies and reforms that I propose today so that we can have a better state budgeting process and much greater efficiencies in state government. Because when we do all that kind of work together, when we move this state forward, when we reject the policies of the past and when we reject the behavior and decisions that this legislature and its supporters made, we will move New Hampshire forward. We can reverse some of the bad decisions of the last 2 years. We can find resources, for instance, by restoring that cigarette tax cut that they made while they cut the university system. And we can, when we do those things, begin to rebuild our state, invest in education, freeze tuition for our families, make our school systems better, have the kind of workforce of tomorrow that we need, and a vibrant economy that will lead us forward. And more than that, at the end of the day, New Hampshire does democracy better than anywhere else because citizen legislators work with their governor and their citizens in an accessible, responsive state. and we make decisions together, and we show the rest of the country and the rest of the world that you can move a state forward with a citizen legislature and a consensus-building governor. That's what I hope to be, and I'd ask for your support and your help and your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris, and again, thank you for Rivier University for sponsoring tonight's debate. I want to commend Maggie Hassan for stepping up, as Chris mentioned, to be willing to serve the people of New Hampshire. And I look forward to continuing the discussion, the conversation with New Hampshire voters as we move forward in this election campaign. There is a fundamental difference of worldview. I support public kindergarten, but I think the decisions about public kindergarten, whether to have them, should be made by people, parents, taxpayers, teachers at the local level, not mandated from Concord. Maggie thinks it should be mandated from Concord. I believe that we should have choice in education, which means parents can choose with their children and their local education providers, whether they're found in the local public school or in homeschooling opportunities, at the Christian school down the street, or at the charter school. I worked very hard as chairman of the State Board of Education with our legislative leaders to pass the first charter school legislation in New Hampshire to provide that option for our citizens. Maggie thinks we should be mandating that people attend the school within their zip code. I think the people should be making a choice as to where they should send their children, and we should give them maximum choice to do that. And we should allow charter schools to continue to flourish and be formed in the state. Because I believe in the end, it's about local empowerment, local decision-making, working in partnership with government, not because government mandates it. And the same is true with health care. Washington should not be telling us how to take care of the citizens of our state when it comes to their health care needs or their education. We should be doing it ourselves. There is a fundamental difference in how we view the world. Now, I was a little older than Chris, but like Chris, I grew up as kind of a political geek myself. And as a little kid, 4 or 5 years old, I watched the President of the United States on our grainy black and white TV with the rabbit ears. And I remember hearing that president, or hearing about that president, deliver in his inaugural address a fundamentally critical statement about how radical we are in America. That we were under assault around the world because we believe that the rights of man come not from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God. That's what that president said. And he went on to exhort the people, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. That president called upon our better angels. That president empowered us, said we would put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. And we did put a man on the moon by the end of the decade without a U.S. Department of Education, without a U.S. Department of Energy. We did it because we are Americans, and brought together with fine leadership, we can achieve the unthinkable. This is our hour here in New Hampshire. We can't waste this opportunity to set ourselves onto a new path. Onto a new path that believes in people, in institutions, in local control, and in state government working in partnership. I ask you to join my campaign to lead our state out of where we are currently, to lead us into a new era of prosperity, to renew and improve upon our New Hampshire advantage, and to make sure that our children not only want to stay here, they can stay here, and that they have a New Hampshire that is better than the New Hampshire we inherited through the sacrifice and the hard work of prior generations. I ask for your vote. I ask for your support, and I ask for your prayer. Pray for our country, pray for our state, and pray for those who would choose to lead us. God bless you, God bless America, and God bless the great state of New Hampshire. Thank you very much.
Tonight you heard very competing visions for where each of these candidates wants to take the state of New Hampshire. Different values in some cases, very different positions and policies. I'd like to end the night on some commonality. What you saw here tonight was a shared vision in terms of how they see themselves as our governor, and they shared passion and commitment for taking our state forward. And I'm honored to know both of you and to have worked with both of you in different capacities in our own backgrounds. And regardless of who we see in that corner office in the State House come January of next year, I'm confident that our state is in solid hands based on what we've seen here this evening. Thank you to both of you for being here tonight. Sister Paula, Paul Clark, Karen Cooper, thank you very much for hosting this here tonight. I was delighted to be a part of it. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. Have a great rest of the night, everyone.